So I, being in my early 30s, was not alive when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And like most Americans, I've been exposed to films and books and media about his life, his assassination, and his legacy. And his legacy is perhaps the most important factor from my perspective as a historian. Kennedy's shadow looms over all the subsequent presidents. Bill Clinton framed himself in terms of Kennedy. Nixon found himself haunted by Kennedy, and Johnson ultimately couldn't live up to his own image of what Kennedy was looking for. It's important to remember that Kennedy matters in depth, in some ways even more so than he did in life as a president. In 1960, Kennedy won the election in a very close race over Richard Nixon with slightly under 50% of the vote. After his assassination 10 years later, something like 64% of Americans claimed they had voted for Kennedy. His stature grew in his death, in part because Americans like myth. We want explanations. We like narrative. And Kennedy fulfills, in some way, this story of a charismatic young leader cut down in the prime of his life. And we are both unsettled and drawn to that story as a people, as it provides us a marker in our narrative. That's why the day of Kennedy's assassination is one of those seminal moments, like Pearl Harbor, like September 11th, when Americans can look back and say, I remember where I was that day. And of course, those days are partly determined, and the nature of those memories partly determined by the demographics of the nation. So Kennedy was the first president born in the 20th century. He's young, he's handsome, he's virile, at least in public opinion. Only in later years do we learn about the serious health issues that he faced that could barely kept him up during the day. But at the time, to a young generation of baby boomers who had been born after World War II and who were coming of age politically in the early 60s, Kennedy represented something new and exciting, a hopefulness that matched his slogan of the new frontier. Following Kennedy and following his successors seemed to be a way of leading America in a new direction for a new century.